I still can't believe it. The words echo in my mind every single day, a little voice, so innocent, yet so devastating. Grandma, she'd whispered, her eyes wide. Mommy has a secret room, and she keeps something yucky in there. My heart nearly stopped. My sweet, usually bubbly granddaughter, Lily, looked genuinely scared. And what she told me next shattered my entire perception of my daughter-in-law, a woman I had welcomed into our family with open arms, a woman I thought I knew. It forced me to do something I never in a million years imagined: call the police on my own son's wife. Was I wrong for believing a 6-year-old seemingly outlandish story and turning our family upside down? Tell me, honestly, would you have done the same thing? You see, my son, Mark, met Sarah about 8 years ago. They were both in their late 20s, building their careers, and seemed absolutely smitten. Sarah was, on the surface, everything you could want in a daughter-in-law. She was charming, intelligent, always impeccably dressed, and had a laugh that could light up a room. From the moment I met her, she made an effort to connect with me, asking about my life, my hobbies, my past. I genuinely thought Mark had found a gem. My husband, bless his soul, passed away a few years before Mark met Sarah, so it was just me, and having Sarah around brought a new energy to our small family unit. They got married a year later in a beautiful ceremony, and 2 years after that, Lily arrived, a bundle of pure joy that cemented Sarah's place even further. Lily quickly became the apple of my eye, a bright, inquisitive child with a penchant for storytelling and a boundless imagination. I adored spending time with her, often taking her for weekend outings to the park, the museum, or just baking cookies at my house. Sarah, for her part, always seemed like a dedicated mother. She was organized, strict but loving, and always made sure Lily was well cared for. They lived in a beautiful, albeit somewhat older, house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a spacious place with character, and I remember Mark mentioning some quirks about it when they first bought it. A strange layout, a few rooms that seemed disproportionately small or oddly placed. I never thought much of it, just assumed it was typical for an older home. Over the years, our relationship with Sarah deepened. She confided in me about small struggles at work or anxieties about motherhood, and I'd offer advice and support, as any mother-in-law would. We even went on a few girls' days together, shopping and having lunch. I truly felt she was like a second daughter to me. This is why Lily's revelation hit me like a physical blow. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a particularly sunny day, and I had picked Lily up from school. Sarah had a late meeting, and Mark was away on a business trip, a fairly common occurrence in his line of work. We were at my house, making paper airplanes in the living room, when Lily suddenly got quiet. This wasn't like her. She was usually a chatterbox, her little mind constantly buzzing with observations and questions. I noticed her eyes kept darting towards the hallway, almost as if she was expecting someone. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked, my voice soft. She hesitated, fiddling with the paper airplane in her hands. "Grandma," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "Mommy has a secret room." My first thought was that this was a new imaginary game, something born from her vivid imagination. "Oh, really? What kind of secret room?" I humored her, smiling gently. "Is it a fairy castle?" She shook her head, her expression serious, far too serious for a 6-year-old.
"No, Grandma."
"It's a yucky room, and she keeps yucky stuff in there. She told me never to go in or tell anyone." My smile faltered. "Yucky stuff? What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, a tiny seed of unease beginning to sprout in my chest. Lily then proceeded to describe a small, windowless room, hidden behind a built-in bookshelf in their house's study. She said she'd only seen it once, when Sarah had accidentally left the bookshelf ajar. She described a strange, metallic smell, and shelves filled with weird jars and sparkly rocks, and a big book with funny writing. She even mentioned a small, ornate dagger that Sarah kept in a velvet case. The details she provided were far too specific, far too consistent for a made-up story. She didn't embellish. She just reported what she'd seen, with the wide-eyed fear of a child who had stumbled upon something she shouldn't have. She spoke of Sarah's stern warning, her voice hushed and serious, about what would happen if Lily ever told anyone about the room, or if she ever tried to go in there again. Sarah had apparently told her it was a special room for Mommy's important work, and that it was very dangerous for little girls. The way Lily described Sarah's demeanor, the chilling seriousness in her mother's eyes, sent a shiver down my spine. This wasn't a playful secret. This was a hidden part of Sarah's life that she desperately wanted to keep concealed, even from her own child. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a craft room, a hobby, something innocuous that Sarah just wanted to keep private. But yucky stuff, weird jars, sparkly rocks, a big book with funny writing, and a dagger? That didn't sound like scrapbooking supplies or a pottery studio. That sounded darker. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to get more details from Lily, but she clammed up, clearly remembering Sarah's warning. Her innocent fear was palpable, and it solidified my growing suspicion. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself I was overreacting, that it was just a child's imagination running wild, perhaps fueled by a spooky story she'd heard. But the image of Lily's scared face, the tremor in her voice, kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I didn't want to alarm Mark, especially since he was out of town, but I knew I couldn't ignore this. My granddaughter was clearly frightened, and my daughter-in-law, a woman I thought I knew, was clearly hiding something significant. The fact that she had instilled fear in her own child to maintain this secret was the most disturbing aspect. I decided I needed to investigate. Discreetly, of course, that I concocted a plan to visit their house while Sarah was at work. I'd feign needing to pick something up for Mark, or drop off some of Lily's forgotten toys. I spent that night tossing and turning, my mind racing through every possibility, every rational and irrational explanation. Could Sarah be involved in something illegal? Was it something dangerous? The thought was absurd, yet the seed of doubt had been firmly planted. The next day, after a restless night, I put my plan into action. I called Sarah and told her I had accidentally left my reading glasses at her house the last time I visited, and if it was okay, I'd swing by to pick them up since I had an eye doctor's appointment later. She sounded a little hesitant, but eventually agreed, saying she'd leave the spare key under the doormat. A red flag, in retrospect, was how quickly she agreed to let me in when she wasn't home. Normally, she'd offer to bring them over or suggest I come when she was there. It was almost as if she wanted me to believe she had nothing to hide, or perhaps she was too busy to think straight. As I drove to their house, my heart hammered in my chest. I felt like a spy, which was utterly ridiculous, given that I was just a concerned grandmother. But the stakes felt incredibly high. Lily's fear was real, and I had to find out why. I pulled into their driveway, the familiar house looking perfectly innocent under the midday sun. I retrieved the key, my hands trembling slightly as I unlocked the front door. The house was quiet, save for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I walked through the living room, past the kitchen, and towards the study, which was located at the back of the house, overlooking the garden. It was a cozy room, usually filled with books and Mark's old college trophies. As I entered, my eyes immediately went to the wall where the built-in bookshelf stood. It was a beautiful piece, custom-made, filling almost an entire wall. I approached it, my breath catching in my throat. I ran my hand along the spines of the books, then along the wooden frame. I gently pushed on different sections, looking for any give, any indication of a hidden mechanism. It took me a few minutes, but then, near the bottom right corner, behind a particularly heavy encyclopedia, I felt a slight resistance. I pushed harder, and with a soft click, a section of the bookshelf, perhaps 3 feet wide, swung inward, revealing a darkened opening. My blood ran cold. Lily hadn't been imagining it. My stomach dropped. I hesitated, a wave of fear washing over me. What if Sarah walked in? What if what was behind that door was truly horrifying? But the image of Lily's scared face, her innocent plea for help, spurred me forward. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone for its flashlight, and stepped into the hidden room. The air in the room was heavy, stale, and carried a faint, metallic scent, just as Lily had described. It was small, no more than 6 by 8 feet, and completely windowless. The walls were painted a dark, almost oppressive gray. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing shelves packed with objects that made my skin crawl. There were indeed weird jars, some containing what looked like dried herbs, others filled with murky liquids, and a few with what I can only describe as petrified animal parts. Small, shriveled claws, tiny bones, things that looked like mummified insect husks. My gorge rose. This was not a craft room. This was something far, far more sinister. There were also sparkly rocks, but these weren't pretty crystals. They were jagged, dark stones, some glinting with an unnatural sheen, arranged on velvet cloths. And then there was the big book with funny writing. It lay open on a small, altar-like table in the center of the room. Its pages were yellowed, brittle, covered in what looked like ancient symbols and illustrations that depicted grotesque figures and disturbing rituals. The script was unlike anything I had ever seen, certainly not English or any language I could recognize. It had an unsettling, almost hypnotic quality. Next to the book, in a velvet-lined box, was the dagger. It was indeed ornate, with a dark, twisted handle and a blade that glinted wickedly even in the dim light of my phone. But it wasn't just any decorative knife. The tip was stained, a dark, rusty brown, and as I shone the light closer, I saw faint, dried residue on its surface. My mind reeled. What was Sarah doing with all of this? This wasn't just some strange hobby. This felt like something out of a horror movie. My hands were shaking so violently, I almost dropped my phone. I felt a growing sense of dread, a chilling realization that my daughter-in-law was involved in something deeply disturbing, something that posed a threat to my family, to Lily. As I scanned the room again, my eyes caught something else on a lower shelf, a small, leather-bound journal. It stood out amidst the other bizarre artifacts. My instincts screamed at me to get out, to call Mark, to do something. But curiosity and a terrifying need to understand compelled me to open the journal. The handwriting inside was unmistakably Sarah's. The entries were dated, going back several years, even before she met Mark. As I read the first few lines, my blood ran cold, a feeling far more intense than anything I had experienced so far. It wasn't just strange, it was terrifying. The journal detailed rituals, spells, incantations. It spoke of summoning entities, of dark pacts, of seeking power through forbidden means. There were references to offerings and sacrifices. And then I saw it, a passage that made my heart leap into my throat, a passage that specifically mentioned Lily. It wasn't in the context of harm, not directly, but it spoke of using Lily's innocent energy and unblemished spirit to enhance a particularly potent ritual. It mentioned dates, specific dates that corresponded to Lily's birth, her first birthday, and other significant milestones in her young life. My vision blurred. My granddaughter, my sweet Lily, was being used in these horrifying rituals. This wasn't just a strange hobby. This was a fundamental betrayal, a terrifying endangerment of my precious grandchild. The love I had felt for Sarah curdled into a bitter, icy fear. The woman I had trusted, the mother of my grandchild, was not who I thought she was. She was a dangerous, deluded individual, and my granddaughter was in grave danger. I slammed the journal shut, my hands still shaking, my mind racing. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not leave this information untouched. I couldn't confront Sarah. I didn't know what she was capable of. I couldn't even call Mark directly and tell him this. He would either not believe me, or he would confront her, potentially escalating a dangerous situation. I had to protect Lily, and I had to do it immediately. I backed out of the room, carefully closing the bookshelf behind me, making sure it clicked back into place. I stumbled out of the house, my mind a whirlwind of fear, anger, and utter disbelief. My reading glasses were long forgotten. I got into my car, but instead of driving home, I pulled over a few blocks away. My hands were still shaking as I pulled out my phone. I knew what I had to do. There was no other choice. So that's the situation I was in. I had just discovered that my daughter-in-law, A woman I loved and trusted was secretly involved in what appeared to be dark, dangerous rituals, and worse, she seemed to be using my innocent granddaughter as part of them. The evidence was right there, in her own hidden room, in her own journal. I was alone. Mark was out of town, and the woman I suspected of these horrors was Lily's mother. I had to make a choice, a terrifying, life-altering choice that would undoubtedly shatter my family. Do I confront her, risking who knows what? Do I tell Mark, potentially destroying his marriage and making him doubt my sanity? Or do I go to the authorities with this unbelievable story? Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? What's your gut reaction to this horrifying discovery? My fingers trembled as I dialed the police. Each digit felt heavy, loaded with the weight of the decision I was making. When the dispatcher answered, my voice was a shaky whisper as I tried to explain, without sounding completely insane, what I had just uncovered. I focused on the tangible evidence, the hidden room, the disturbing objects, the journal detailing rituals, and mentioning Lily. They asked me to wait for officers to arrive, and I gave them my location, which was still a few blocks from Mark and Sarah's house. While I waited, every minute felt like an hour. My mind raced, picturing Sarah, picturing Lily. What if Sarah came home? What if she discovered I had been there? The fear for Lily's safety was paramount. When the 2 patrol cars finally pulled up, I practically leaped out of my car, eager to relay my story to someone who could actually do something. The officers, 2 young men, listened with a mixture of skepticism and concern as I recounted everything, from Lily's initial whisper to the chilling contents of Sarah's journal. I showed them the exact location of the house, described the hidden room, and reiterated the specific details of the artifacts and the journal entries. They assured me they would investigate, but their expressions told me they were struggling to believe my story. It sounded fantastical, unbelievable. However, the details were too specific, and my distress too genuine, for them to dismiss it entirely. They asked me to wait in my car down the street while they approached the house. I watched, my heart pounding, as they knocked on the door. No answer. They tried again, and then, after a few minutes, they decided to proceed with caution. They had to be careful. They couldn't just barge in without a warrant, but given the potential danger to a child, they had grounds to investigate further, especially since I had been given permission to enter the house by Sarah herself, which meant my entry, and thus my discovery, was not illegal. What happened next felt like an eternity unfolding in slow motion. I saw them talking to a neighbor, then one officer went around to the back of the house while the other stayed at the front. After a tense period, I saw them both return to their patrol cars, one of them making a call on his radio. A few minutes later, more police vehicles arrived, along with an unmarked car. Detectives. My story was being taken seriously. The next few hours were a blur of intense questioning. I was brought to the police station, where I gave a full statement, recounting every detail, every memory, every unsettling observation about Sarah that, in hindsight, now made a terrifying kind of sense. The detectives were thorough, asking probing questions, trying to poke holes in my story. But the truth was there, undeniable. I even managed to draw a rough sketch of the room and some of the symbols I'd glimpsed in the journal, hoping it would lend credence to my unbelievable tale. Meanwhile, a search warrant was obtained for Mark and Sarah's house. I was kept updated, in fragments, throughout the day. The hidden room was found, just as I described. The artifacts were collected as evidence, and most significantly, Sarah's journal was retrieved. It was the journal that truly turned the tide. Once the police had a chance to look at its contents, to see the disturbing entries and the explicit mention of Lily, the situation escalated rapidly. They immediately contacted Child Protective Services. Sarah was apprehended when she returned home from work later that evening. I wasn't present for her arrest, but the image of it haunted me regardless. Mark, my poor son, was devastated. The police contacted him on his business trip, telling him that his wife had been arrested and that Lily had been taken into protective custody. He immediately cut his trip short and flew home, utterly bewildered and heartbroken. The confrontation with Mark was one of the hardest moments of my life. He arrived at my house, his face pale and drawn, his eyes red-rimmed from crying. He couldn't believe it. He refused to believe it. How could the woman he loved, the mother of his child, be capable of such monstrous acts? He accused me of fabricating stories, of letting my imagination run wild, of destroying his family. It took days, and then weeks, for him to truly grasp the gravity of the situation. He read the police reports. He saw the photographs of the hidden room. He even had the horrifying experience of reading excerpts from Sarah's journal, which the detectives reluctantly shared with him to demonstrate the extent of her delusion and the danger Lily had been in. Slowly, painfully, the truth began to sink in. He realized that I hadn't betrayed him. I had protected his daughter. The shock, the anger, the betrayal he felt were immense. He had lived with this woman, shared his life with her, and had no idea of the dark secrets she harbored. It was a profound trauma for him. Lily was placed with me temporarily, and then permanently, after Child Protective Services determined that it was in her best interest. Sarah was diagnosed with a severe delusional disorder, exacerbated by what psychiatrists described as a deep-seated belief in occult practices. She was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial for the initial charges related to child endangerment and emotional abuse. Instead, she was committed to a secure psychiatric facility for intensive treatment. The legal process was complex and emotionally draining. Mark and I had to testify, recounting the story over and over again. Lily, thankfully, was spared the direct legal proceedings, but she received extensive therapy to help her process the trauma of her mother's actions and the disruption to her young life. The artifacts from the room were studied by experts in cults and occult practices, and their findings were chilling. They confirmed that Sarah's practices were indeed dangerous, though the extent of physical harm she intended or inflicted on Lily remained difficult to fully ascertain due to the nature of the rituals, being more psychological and spiritual manipulation rather than direct physical abuse at that time. However, the potential for escalation was clearly present, and the emotional and psychological toll on Lily was undeniable. The community was, as you can imagine, scandalized. Whispers followed our family everywhere. Friends and neighbors struggled to reconcile the image of the charming Sarah with the reality of her dark secret. Some even suggested I had gone too far, that I should have tried to talk to Sarah first, or to Mark. But I knew, deep down, that I had made the right decision. My granddaughter's safety was paramount. Lily is now thriving. She's still with me, and we're building a new life together. Mark visits constantly, and he's an amazing, devoted father, though he still carries the scars of what happened. He's working hard to rebuild his life and to be there for Lily in every way possible. He's also receiving therapy to deal with the betrayal and the trauma. He eventually came to understand, fully, that my actions, however painful, were necessary. He even thanked me, through tears, for saving his daughter. It's not the family life we ever imagined, not by a long shot. But we are healing, slowly but surely. The hidden room has since been demolished and the space repurposed, cleansed of its dark history. The house was sold, as Mark couldn't bear to live there anymore. We moved forward, albeit with a profound understanding of the hidden depths of human nature and the unimaginable secrets that can lurk beneath the most polished exteriors. This experience taught me that sometimes the most horrific truths are hidden in plain sight, and that gut feelings, especially when it comes to protecting the innocent, should never be ignored. It also showed me the incredible resilience of a child and the immense power of a grandparent's love. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, calling the police on my own daughter-in-law, tearing apart my son's marriage, and exposing a secret that shattered our world. But I would do it again in a heartbeat to protect Lily. So, what are your thoughts on this whole mess? Do you think I did the right thing? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this story shocking and believe I was on the right side, please like this video. And if you want to hear more stories like this, where ordinary lives are turned upside down by extraordinary circumstances, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess, and whether you've ever had to make an impossible choice for someone you love, in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next story.